Somebody walked away with it a few minutes ago. So, yes. The worst part of giving a talk is 5 minutes right before. Sorry? I think the worst thing about giving a talk is 5 minutes right before when you can't keep your hands just from moving. Do one more voice check. Coming through clearly, everyone? Good. For whatever reason, these things tend not to pick me up very well, so. Good morning. So I'm here to talk to you about the Fedora Server. But first, a little bit about me. You may remember me from such projects as the System Security Services daemon, RollKit, a little bit of free IPA, and just a whole lot of mailing threads. So, what are we going to discuss today? First, I'm going to give a little bit of overview and a little history of why we started the Fedora Server project. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 technologies that we've been developing and that have seen their first release in Fedora 21. A couple of these, I'm curious, how many of you went and saw the Cockpit talk yesterday? Almost all of you. And the Openlm talk? A few of you. Okay, so I will try not to bore you with all of the cool stuff you saw yesterday. But let's be honest, it's really cool stuff, and I will probably yammer about it anyway. So let's start with a little bit of an overview. So years and years and years ago, you can see from my gray hair, I started with Red Hat Linux. And while a lot of people were using it as a desktop, the core set of people that were running on Red Hat Linux were really, slide behind, were really IT people. They were the hackers and the explorers and the, hey, that's funny, I wonder how that worked, sorts of folks. And this is the real base behind who started this amazing series of projects that has become some 100 Linux distributions, and most famously, of course, Fedora. Of course, but well, at least to the folks in this room. But what became interesting is that over time, different constituencies, the problems started moving up the stack a little bit. People became less interested in, I wonder how I can get 5% more performance out of my C library, and into I wonder how many polygons I can stick on a screen. And as Fedora grew and it evolved into what became for a long time much more of a desktop-oriented distribution, that original set of people, that original core of admins and playthings, people who were playing with things, just started getting kind of pushed to the background. They started really feeling like they were not as much a part of the community as they used to be, that their entire purpose for being there and participating was actually to act as stop energy, to say, no, 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 you can't run without a firewall. That's terrifying. You can't do this, you can't do that. And it really just became a matter of a lot of these people became demoralized, and they really just stopped contributing, or they only contributed when something was seriously wrong as they saw it. And that just didn't seem right. I mean, and again, I'm old guard. My first experience with Linux was I ran a Quake 2 server in college, and it was just worlds better than running it on Windows. And the thing was, my experience at that time was, I went and one of my friends handed me a Red Hat Linux 5, I think, CD, or maybe it was 6, and said, here, try run it on here. So I brought up some old hardware, and wow, that is, I am handling 4 times the users. And I'm getting a little bit sidetracked there, but that was really my first experience, and I think it was the first experience of a lot of the people that the older folks that work on the Fedora project, and not being able to keep that going was kind of a problem. So, and over time, I mean, the thing I loathed hearing on the Fedora mailing lists, and I hear it at least once every couple of weeks, Fedora is not for servers. You can't run a server on Fedora. You should be using CentOS, or you should be using RHEL, or Ubuntu. But but I never liked hearing the words "Fedora is not for servers," particularly because I have a number of friends and colleagues who are, in fact, running Fedora, in many cases in production. I know of several financial institutions that are using it because some of those stable OSs are just not up to date enough for them. So our goal with Fedora Server was to take that horrible statement out of the conversation. We wanted to have an answer that just says, yes, Fedora is for servers. We have Fedora Server, and we want it to be useful on its own. We want it to be more stable than Fedora has been traditionally. And we also really, really want this to be the place where the wider society, the wider group of people who are going to be deploying software, and not just writing software. I really mean deploying software, which is a very different problem. We want them to be taking a look at Fedora Server and realizing that we can do our work here. We can get it ready. And when down the line that next version of that enterprise operating system comes out, we won't have to change it. We will be first to market on RHEL 8, RHEL 9, because we worked in Fedora, because we made sure that it deployed on Fedora. So to that end, we've been developing a number of really neat tools, and we've been trying to craft a story around our marketing and our ambassadorship about what Fedora Server is and what you should be doing in it. So the first passes at these, we have 3 really interesting new technologies. The first of these is RollKit. So what is RollKit? The idea behind RollKit is that we wanted to be able to take a freshly brought up server and say, all right, that machine, I want that to be a domain controller. I want that to be a database server. And I wanted to be able to do this in such a way that a non-expert admin could bring this up and have something that was running and maintaining at least for the most part, best practices. Would it necessarily be perfectly tuned? No. But frankly, the set of people that are going to care how carefully tuned something is already has a level of expertise beyond beyond that first exposure. So we built RollKit to solve this purpose. It's a daemon, a socket-activated daemon on the system. It has no overhead when it's not being used, and its purpose is it has a plugin architecture where we can just say drop a series of Python modules into a directory, and this machine now has a public dbus API, which is being wrapped by which will be wrapped by Cockpit in Fedora 22. We've got some vague plans to have it supported as a remote API through something like Openlmi. And you basically send a small list, the minimum subset of necessary commands, necessary options. And this module will just bring the machine up, let you know when it's done. And for example, in Fedora 21, we've got a complete domain controller, a master domain controller, provided by the FreeIPA project that through RollKit, you have to pass exactly one argument, your admin password, the admin password you want on this domain controller. After that, you now have a complete system that you can manage with a web UI through that server. And no hassle. There was no complex man page. There was no complicated deciding what IP ranges you needed to use. There was no, it has now set up for you a complete LDAP and Kerberos environment with single sign-on capabilities and all sorts of neat stuff, all sorts of the neat tools that FreeIPA can provide. And I'm not gonna give you a complete overview of FreeIPA. If you want that, I can see that several of the developers are sitting in the audience. On top of that, we're working on a number of other different potential services. In Fedora 22, I'm working on a Postgres-based database server role. Some of the other ones that we've talked about, we want to have a simple memcached server, and we may be doing that. We may use that one as a prototype for our first containerized server role. A very ambitious future option is a file server that runs NFS and Samba. That may be harder to accomplish with our stated goal of trying to keep things simplistic. And because, of course, it's a complicated topic, and getting that right requires a certain level of knowledge. Also, during this very conference, and I haven't had a chance to work up my slides, but I've been talking with, for example, some of the Colab folks. We'd like to work with them to build a groupware role for Fedora Server going forward. That maybe someday would be an option for a certain downstream OS. I've been talking with some of the storage folks on perhaps making a Gluster or Ceph node role deployment. So there's really a lot of opportunity here, I think, and managing to do some of this stuff without requiring 3 advanced degrees, I think would be a major win, and I think it would be a real value add for the Fedora project as a whole to all of a sudden have these capabilities and be able to tell people, hey, come try Fedora. You need to set up your new small business? Run Fedora Server until you get off the ground. And have people have people's first experience with Fedora not be, so what's this little blinky cursor, or what's this? How do I? I can't install an LDAP server without reading four books, a man page, and a blog post that it turns out was out of date 6 years ago. So I think we have a lot of opportunity there with RollKit. So the next topic on my little tour of Fedora Server is Openlmi. Now I saw that not a lot of you went to the talk yesterday, so I'll give a little bit more overview on Openlmi than I will on Cockpit. OpenLMI is a public SIM, Common Information Model, based interface for Fedora Server. I saw a couple of you in the audience wince when I said that, which is absolutely correct. I like to tell the little story that I had on my desk at Red Hat a 100-page document that comprised the table of contents for the specification of DMTF SIM for the models. So it's a very powerful and very fully described system, but it was really, really hard to use. And frankly, no one had ever before the Openlmi project attempted to create a reference implementation. So in many cases, it also didn't actually work as specified. But the Openlmi project persevered, and they found a lot of interesting ways to make the SIM system much more consumable. One of the things that we built, I was involved with the Openlmi project, but certainly not a developer on it. One of the things that the Openlmi project built was the Lmi Shell, which is essentially a wrapper around the Python shell with a number of useful SIM-related helper functions that we were really trying to position as Linux's answer to PowerShell. If there's any one strength I can point to right now in the Windows Server environment, it's PowerShell. It plugs into everything, it can do a great many things, and it's scriptable. We didn't really have that. We have things like Ansible, where you connect to SSH and you run a whole bunch of low-level commands, or it runs them on your behalf. But we really didn't have a programmatic way to just say, on that machine, I want the following actions to take place. So we built the Lmi Shell, and among other things, some of the things that made it really fun were we actually had a scripting environment with tab completion that made it extremely discoverable how to work with all of these complicated models. Then we still decided that was not simple enough for most people. So we built the Lmi command, which it took cues from things like the versh command and the nmcli command with a pluggable interface to handle different aspects of system configuration. And it just produced them in a very, very easy to use and unified interface. So the same user experience you would have to change your IP address for your network, you could also create a RAID 5 set. There weren't 7 different commands that you had to learn, all of which had unique idiosyncrasies. I at this point have entirely abandoned the use of lv create and pv create and whatnot, and I always use the Lmi commands because they're just more digestible. So with that, we now have a stack that has some really easy and bash scriptable commands, and they could provide a small but powerful subset of the capabilities. And then we move up to the Lmi Shell, and you have a scriptable environment that can talk to any of that 100-page table of contents set of models, which gives you an incredible amount of power. And of course, you can also communicate with Openlmi. It's a well-understood SIM protocol using SIM over SIMXML WebM. So you can talk to it through any language that you please. We know that there are bindings for C and C++, Perl, Python, Ruby, Java. I was actually pretty horrified to discover the Perl one, actually. But yeah, play with it. It's come a long way, and it's got a lot of capabilities that I think people will be surprised about, and it allows some excellent monitoring and configuration change capabilities. It's not Puppet. It's not Ansible. Openlmi is it's more interactive than it is declarative. The idea with something like Puppet is you would tell a system, become this state, and expect that the result was the system was in that state. Openlmi is more about, I've just noticed that one of my RAID disks is failing. OpenLMI might be able to take that machine out of the set, throw in a warm spare, and then notify an admin that they needed to go replace the drive. Things reconstruct the array. Those are some of the things that you can do there with a more dynamic language than you can with a declarative tool like Puppet. So we believe that those are complementary, not contradictory tools. Cockpit. Cockpit is really cool. Cockpit is the primary thing that we've been getting notoriety for in newspapers and magazines, blog posts. Everybody loves Cockpit. What is Cockpit? For those of you who did not attend Steph's excellent presentation yesterday, Cockpit is a modern server manager. It's very similar in use to Microsoft's Windows Server Manager, in that when you start up a Windows Server machine, you have right in front of you a set of tools to allow you to get some stuff off the ground. And traditionally, we haven't had that. I alluded to before, the non-expert admin starts up a Fedora box, and if he if he knew to install a GNOME environment, he might have a desktop, but more often than not, he's going to have a text prompt and no clue. With Cockpit, we're providing a low-resource, web-based management console that allows the non-expert admin to do a lot of the really interesting and but still basic stuff without having to know how it does that. So from Fedora 21 on, anytime you boot a Fedora server, if you go to its IP address port 9090 in a web browser, you will have access to a very, very well-designed and very easy to use tool for managing that system. And certainly, we wanted it to be a web-based tool. We didn't want to re-implement Microsoft Server Manager because there's a lot of overhead in Linux to running a desktop environment. And frankly, even Windows is starting to figure out that in a data center, often Arizona somewhere, the crash cart solution is really not one that that scales. So first and foremost, Cockpit needed to be able to manage a headless system. So web-based can manage one system, or when set up properly, can also manage a small fleet of systems. Particularly when used with FreeIPA or Active Directory as part of a domain, Cockpit supports GSS API communication between servers, allowing you to get a quick view of a small environment. Certainly, if you've got a huge fleet of systems, well, first of all, you've probably got a more experienced set of folks on board, but also, at that point, you're going to want to be using a tool more like Satellite or Spacewalk or some other powerful orchestration system to deal with a large number of systems. But for that small and medium business or that first trial deployment, Cockpit provides a face for the server that really we've not had before. I mean, there have been attempts to make comprehensive configuration systems. Let's pretend that LinuxConf and webmin don't exist, because those were nice tries. But I honestly believe that the Cockpit project is going to be a successful way to approach this, because it's coming from a perspective of answering genuine user needs, as opposed to trying to serve necessarily you and I, most of the people in this room, who want every single button to press. You'll still have those buttons, and that's one of the things that's really cool about Cockpit. You'll see up here I wrote, plays well with others. And what that means is that Cockpit is designed to only use system-level APIs, and it's designed to monitor them as well. So unlike LinuxConf or many of the other, or some of the old system config tools that exist in the past, using Cockpit does not mean that you have now made it impossible to edit a text file somewhere. It means that everything you do in Cockpit goes through a standard API, which makes changes on the system, and then anytime you use another tool that uses that same API, it will be reflected back in Cockpit, and they will always stay the same. There is no saved state in Cockpit. There's no sense that Cockpit is owning your system. It is representing your system. It's also really very modular in the most recent releases. Fedora 22 pre-releases are now expanding out to include the ability to add new pages and new modules very easily into the environment. There was a workshop here 2 days ago, and I sat down in it, and I started working on a RollKit module to deploy a domain controller in Cockpit. Aside from the fact that it looks awful, because I'm not a graphics designer, it took fewer than 6 hours to have a complete module for deploying free IPA through Cockpit. I'm sorry? No. I am not doing a live demo, I'm afraid. Especially because, as I said, it looks horrible. But it's very, very rough at the moment. But some of the other things that Cockpit can do, of course, it wouldn't be 2014 or 2015 without mentioning Docker. So Cockpit has a really neat panel and series of and view of what is going on in your Docker. Yeah, I'm going to stop that. I'm sorry. Yeah, that happened the last time I gave this talk too, is that everybody stopped listening to me when I put that one up, so I really should take that out. Yes, would you care to take a bow, Dan? I'm sorry. So, Cockpit has a really excellent pane for monitoring and starting and downloading Docker images, especially from the classic Docker repos. And unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I had a set of screenshots in my presentation 2 days ago, and they aren't there this morning. So I will, however, try to do a quick glance at my own system. Let me see if this is going to display. Hang on. That's not it. Moment. So here is the current, the most recent Fedora 22 view of Cockpit. So I'll take a look at this. Is running on my local system, so I'm not going to make any changes. It doesn't go well when I do, but for a quick overview, wow, that looks terrible. One moment. So it's here is basically, I don't have any of them running at the moment, but every container that you have and image that you have are viewable. You can trivially get a new image, and I doubt I have network, so I'm not going to try. But with a quick lexical search. So here I was playing around with some of the Postgres and the Nginx stuff, and if let's see if this will start. Of course not. Yeah, that's live demos. Well, in any case, one of the nice things, it'll show you your combined CPU usage, your combined memory usage, and you can also drill down and get a better look at exactly what your containers are using as we go. So it's really neat. It's it's not the place you're going to build your new containers. You're still going to want to do that through your Docker files and your various other tools. But it's a really good place to see what exactly is actually running on your system. All right, so let me go back to my slides. So yeah, Docker, Docker, Docker. So, my summary. Fedora Server is going to be awesome. We are doing a lot of really cool things, and we are targeting, I think, a constituency of Fedora that we really had been ignoring. And I think, and I know that that is bringing people back, because I've been seeing a lot of new faces popping up in the Fedora Server meetings, talking on the mailing list about it. I get endless questions and emails, even a couple of job offerings. Don't worry about it. However, eventually, a lot of what we have in Fedora 21 is very, very new. We haven't taken it all as far as we want, and I think Fedora 22 is going to be really interesting. We're going to have the database role, the newer cockpit. Obviously, if you start Fedora 21, you're not going to get quite what I showed you today, but if you start Rawhide, you should. And I'm looking forward to seeing. We've gotten a lot of interest and a lot of people talking, and I'd like to see. I can't wait to see what they start doing. There's a lot of work to be done, a lot of opportunity to do it, and we're going to need your help. As Matthew said in his pseudo keynote this morning, Fedora is made of people. And unlike the reference he made, I don't intend to grind them up into meat, but we do need help. We need to expand on this, and I want to work with all of you, and I want to work with the RHEL folks, because, like I said, I'd like very much for Fedora Server to evolve into. I don't want to say that it's a preview of RHEL, because I know that has a negative connotation, but I do want it to be the place where. I think it would be better to say I want it to be the place where all of you help to decide what will be RHEL one day. That these things are so cool that Red Hat decides, hey, we're gonna support that. We're gonna give that to our customers and say this is the right stuff to do, and that's gonna lead back to more people using your stuff, and more people and more hands on it. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Questions? Klaus.
So, at last year's DevConf, the cockpit talk was mentioning OpenLMI as a possible backend, and the OpenLMI talk was mentioning cockpit as a possible frontend. This year, neither did mention the other, but you brought it up. So
okay. Yes. The question was, at last year's DevConf, the OpenLMI project mentioned Cockpit as a potential consumer, and the Cockpit project mentioned potentially using OpenLMI as a transport. So that didn't happen. It was ultimately decided that the way that Cockpit wanted to do things, specifically with the responsiveness as a primary design goal, was not compatible with OpenLMI's more polling-based system. So what we did do instead was that both projects have focused very heavily on making sure that the underlying technologies, those core APIs that we use, those are unified, so that whether or not you come through Cockpit or OpenLMI, you are having the same exact work done, and that it will reflect in either place. So while while Cockpit isn't using the OpenLMI protocol, I think that both projects have worked well together in terms of getting that low level more aligned. Does that answer your question?
So you have the Postgres database as one of the potential role-kit roles, right? And you also had it as a Docker container. Do you have any view on
okay.
that good delivery format and yeah, that kind of stuff?
All right. So yes, the question was in my talk, I mentioned Postgres as a server role, and then I also mentioned it in Cockpit when I was doing the Cockpit overview, that I happened to have a couple of containers of it. Part of that was just simply my development process. It was the easiest way for me to see how somebody set up Postgres was to pull down the public image that was in the Fedora Docker files and use that as a base to figure out what to do with the roles. I would very much like for some of the RoleKit server roles to be designed to spin up containers as a mechanism at some point. We decided not to do that with Postgres at the moment, and the biggest reason for that is that at present Docker only runs and is only supported to run on x86-64, and we really want the server roles to be cross-platform, so they have to run on i686 and they have to run on ARM v7 and AR64, and I don't want to splinter the Fedora server into having functionality that is only available if you happen to be running one particular set of hardware. So at the moment, containers are off the table, although I'm told, maybe Dan can fill me in on this, that there are efforts to expand the Docker to cross-platform capability. And when that happens, I think we'll turn to a lot more focus on containerization. Dimitri?
What's the vision of the role of the Openlm?
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
What is the vision of the role of Openlm in the containerized world? One side you have Docker and Kubernetes, and the other side you have tools to manage the system. So how they
The best answer sorry, the question was, what is the role of OpenLMI when in a containerized role, and and how one manages those containers? And unfortunately, the answer I'm going to give is we are still trying to figure that out. We really don't know. So I've got 5 minutes. I can take a couple more questions.
Fedora Server kind of seems to fit the bill, but can you elaborate a bit on how you're going to keep it more stable in regular Fedora?
Right. Okay, so the question was from a fellow from Overt that Fedora has traditionally been very bleeding edge, or leading edge, as we prefer to say, but that can sometimes lead to stability problems, and that it means that some projects, including Overt, have considered moving to CentOS as an upstream as opposed to Fedora. And what are we at Fedora Server going to try to do as far as stability? So those are very interesting questions, and I will not pretend that we have solved them yet. They are high-level goals. Some of the things that have been suggested, we're working very much on helping with some of the AutoQA stuff and possibly some of the gating of rawhide, more integration testing. One of the things that's been remarkably helpful, for example, is the Cockpit team has developed a continuous integration system that entirely by accident has also managed to prove to be one of the most comprehensive continuous integration systems for Fedora. Because, I said most comprehensive. I didn't say it was comprehensive. It deals with enough of the low-level stuff that when somebody breaks something in Fedora, it usually breaks Cockpit, and we find out about it faster than we used to. So a lot of that is going to be improving our tooling and our capabilities for that. One moment. Some of the other things that we've proposed but are not acting on at present are we've talked about possibly having an extended life cycle for the Fedora server. For example, freezing its package set on a release, and then I shouldn't say freezing a package set. I should say that instead of always taking Fedora rawhide into the next release for a period of maybe 12 months or 18 months, instead make a branch where we only take those things that we have tested that are newer. So we still want to try to be leading, but have a stricter policy of what goes into the next release of Fedora Server than the rest of the distro might be. And those are things that we're still working out. Those are not, by any stretch of the imagination, plans, but they're ways that we're approaching it.
surprising how Fedora can take sometimes. And, but over the time, I think I see it also as a feature. So you want to know these changes. You want to know them early. And the stable stuff is stable, and the development stuff is not so stable. So Docker is breaking a lot fast. For example, they change APIs. They try hard, but you know, yeah, sometimes, quite often, we have to catch up. And of course, that happens at unwelcome times. You want to do it on your own time, but Fedora kind of forces you to do it when it happens. But you have to do it anyway. So it's, yeah, I think we try to just get used to that and stay calm. It's too much.
So just to summarize for the camera, the Cockpit team has agreed to be the continuous integration for Fedora, and they will continue to do all of the work there. I have 90 seconds. Who has one more question? Oh.
What will be the default file system for Fedora Server, Fedora 22?
What will be the default file system for Fedora Server in Fedora 22? It will be XFS, except for /boot, which doesn't support XFS yet. We wanted to do that for Fedora 21, but we didn't have the tooling in place for it. We do now, and I've already landed the patch to change it. Thank you very much.
Hey, Steven, please. Put it to USB.
That looks a little small.
Oh yeah, I was supposed to give those away. I forgot.
Oh, I'll take one.
Yeah, they come in large men's and large and medium women.
Okay, well, is this large man?
I don't think I fit any of those categories.